Hey everyone, Dan Kaufman here again. Thank you so much for being here. This panel is how leading venues are reinventing guest experiences and increasing margins with modern technology. It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Andrew Spencer, VP of Customer Experience at Spot On Appetize, Wayne Scarcella, EVP of Sports and Entertainment at Spot On Appetize, and Chris Pierce, VP of Fan Experience at the New York Jets. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
All right, some quick notes to the audience. Our panelists will do their best after this to make their way to the speed networking portion of the event and network with you all. So join them there immediately after this. Also, please ask questions of our panelists. We want audience questions. And if you give them to us at any time, we're going to try to answer them as soon as we can. Don't wait till the end to send the questions. So send the questions through and we will do our best to get to them. I'm going to start by turning it over to Chris here. And Chris, I want you to take us back to 2022 timeframe where, you felt like you had a plan for every outcome with no fans. And then when fans started to come back in, what was the thought process there from the Jets' perspective? And, how did you think about at that point what you wanted guest hospitality to be? And then we'll kind of ask the same question for Andrew and Wayne. So Chris, take us back.
Sure. Firstly, thanks for having me, Dan. It's great to be here with everyone and share a little bit about our experience in certainly the last 18, 24 months that have been quite interesting. So to that point, we literally went through every possible iteration of what a return would look like for our fans in our venue at MetLife Stadium. And once we had clarity from government officials, CDC, about what that would look like, first and foremost, we wanted people to feel comfortable, right? That was the overarching theme. We need people to feel comfortable returning to the venue. Second was, what are they looking for in their experiences? We all changed a lot how we commerce through the pandemic while we were all working remotely and in various sorts of lockdowns. So as people came back, as venues came back on board, one of the things we wanted to do was reduce the points of friction. So we immediately worked with the state legislature in New Jersey so our venue could then become a cash-free venue. So that has certainly been a big win for our fans, less touch points, some faster transactions because of that. And then overall, looking at things to improve the experience and give multiple service options. So whether that's an expansion of mobile ordering and pickup, an expansion of grab and go concepts, all of those things have contributed to our guests feeling more comfortable returning to the venue. And we've seen a demonstrated increase in per caps because of some of those efforts.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Wayne and Andrew, same question for you. Kind of when you were looking at your customers, recognizing that fans could come back, what did you want to deliver from a fan experience hospitality perspective? What was the goal in 2022, 2021, and now?
I think Chris kind of hinted at, making sure the fan or the returning fan is comfortable. For us, it was providing options, whether it be traditional point of sale purchase with, cashless options such as, EMV, NFC, Apple Pay and such, but also providing the fan the ability to order from their own device, whether that be, a smartphone or in some cases even a kiosk that's provided. Just allowing fans to pick and choose the way they would like to actually transact and not necessarily be forced to transact in, the pre-COVID days. So I think, providing options and allowing a guest or a fan to pick and choose the way they'd like to interface with, the transaction process. For us, that was probably top of mind. There's always been a movement from, getting into the cashless environment and enabling more and more mobile. But I think, as everybody's been accustomed to now, you have QR codes for reading menus and placing orders in places you probably didn't even think you'd have to. So it was embracing the options for us, I think, in the point of sale side as fans were preparing to come back into the venue.
Yeah, and I think when you look at kind of the prehistory of where we were in 2019, maybe early 2020, many teams were starting to dabble in different ways to, create a frictionless kind of experience in their buildings. But because of COVID, we had this mandate that we have to do these things. And so you have to embrace different kinds of technologies, whether it's a QR code or, a kiosk or self-checkout or those kinds of things. And so I think, there's just been this acceleration of adoption by consumers, because where we were, it was moving towards that world, but it was maybe 4 or 5 percentage points per year shifting. And now it's, roughly 90, 95, 98% in that world where, it's almost nearly 100% cashless. That frictionless experience is everywhere. And there's lots of different options. So I think consumers are adapting to that and adopting those technologies, very strongly now.
Interesting. Chris, I wanted to see if we can get a little more detail from you about the actual experience of having to go to the legislature and say, hey, look, it makes sense to have a cashless environment here. Let us have it. And in particular, did you have to sell it in a way where you had to identify the technologies that would allow this to be effective, or was that not necessarily part of the equation?
Yeah, Dan, it's a very interesting conversation, right? Anytime you're working with the government to propose changing an existing law that was put in place for a reason, I think what was really refreshing was the legislature quickly understood the benefits of us going to a cash-free environment, and what that would do for our fans and how that would help people feel comfortable in the return to play. And I think for all of us living through how we were transacting differently through those times, I think state legislature was no different, right? And suddenly saw the value in us transitioning to that environment. It was a fairly quick process, considering, I think it was also something that everyone could wrap their arms around, regardless of party affiliation. So the process that in and of itself was very smooth. And then once the law was changed, for us, it became very, very much about tactical, initiatives on how we were going to institute that, what that was going to look like, what's the opportunity to integrate partners into that.
Interesting. Have you seen two questions that I want to follow up there? One, what kind of maybe fan pushback have you seen, if any? And then two, if you can talk more about the way that partners have really taken to it, and maybe you can add value to the partner relationship. I'd love to hear more about that as well.
Sure. So firstly, in terms of the adoption was extremely smooth. We do have 10 reverse ATMs in MetLife Stadium. So if someone did bring cash and did not have the means of a credit or debit card, they could go to a reverse ATM, put their cash in, get a prepaid Visa debit card for no charge. That debit and credit card never loses value, and it is good anywhere a Visa card is accepted. So Visa being our partner, we worked with them to help provide that. The usage on a normal event is extraordinarily low. It is such a small portion of the population. So it's something we offer. However, it has not been a pain point for our fans in any way, shape, or form. And then beyond that, in terms of the opportunity with Visa, it certainly has created some additional assets for a credit card partner, and some additional messaging points for us to embed them into the experience of, hey, when you're transacting with us, right? Well, Visa is our preferred partner. So it's created this really strong opportunity for us to remind everyone in the building of that relationship.
Interesting. Thank you, Chris. Sure. You guys mentioned a few already, but this question I want to ask you, let's really zero in on maybe 2 to 3 of the successful things from a tech perspective that you've seen over 2021 when it comes to increasing fan comfort and the hospitality experience. We mentioned, obviously, cashless and frictionless is buzzwords, but maybe some specifics. And I've got a list of some that I would ask you guys to comment on, but I want to hear from you first. Maybe 2 to 3, and I'll jump to Wayne, maybe if you don't mind. Wayne, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first the area I would probably offer up is everything in regard to mobile. So one, having a native mobile app, 2, QR code ordering from a mobile device, 3, introducing new concepts. This gave us an opportunity to step back and evaluate an offering that has been out there for years, probably since the beginning of concessions. And that's vending, right? That's your hawkers that are typically selling 2 or 3 products, walking up and down the aisles. Taking a look at all things mobile and considering what you can offer and what you can do, even with hawking, and making it more of a virtual hawker concept. There's always been a challenge with hawkers going from cash to cashless because of the handling of the credit card and how that hawker was going to either hand the EMV device down the aisle, or somebody passing a credit card, which really goes against PCI protocol. What we do now is we actually provide a menu or a sticker that can go on the back of the seat, and it is literally just a QR code identifying where you are, so you can place an order from your phone, pay for it, and have it delivered only from that hawker. Now, the hawker can also turn around and sell product as they traditionally would, without cash in the same swing of things. It also gave us the ability to take a look at how you can enable QR codes either from a tabletop, a poster on the side of a concession stand. So if you wanted to skip the line, you can. And then taking on new concepts like grab and go, where you can literally use your phone as a point of sale, browse a market, pick up a couple of items, scan them with your own phone, your own personal device, have somebody at the checkout look at and make sure that the 2 items in the bag were paid for, or if there was alcohol, that's when the ID verification would happen as well. So I would say that, kind of looking at mobile in a variety of different ways is probably the most successful thing, because I think COVID forced a lot of people to use mobile devices for one way or another. And pre-COVID, I think you can ask anybody, the utilization of mobile is sometimes in the low single digits. Now you're seeing it more in the 20, 30%, or even 40% from an adoption point of view. So I'd say mobile just in general has really been the success story of coming out of COVID for everybody.
Interesting. I'll jump to Andrew, but maybe go to Chris first. Chris, if you want to add more to the mobile story that Wayne told, or if you want to mention anything else, let us know what you think about maybe the 2 most important that came out of 2021.
Sure. So, I feel quite fortunate that we were prescient enough, along with Andrew and Wayne, to pilot mobile ordering in 2019. So we had a really great data set about how our fans responded to that and what that looked like in venue for us at MetLife Stadium. So while we were through the pandemic, we all worked on an aggressive growth strategy of mobile ordering. So now mobile ordering went from a test program in 19 to, when we opened the doors in 21, something that was available to every part of the ecosystem within our stadium experience. And that's from general admission through clubs. So that's really been exciting and been a game changer in terms of fans having another way. If they're more comfortable commercing with us that way, they're transacting with us that way, that was now available in a very widespread manner. And what it's really done is we don't do in-seat delivery in MetLife Stadium. The architecture of the building is such that the rows are so wide. It poses some challenges, and we felt coming out of the COVID environment that probably was not going to be well received by our fans. So right now it's an express pickup location. And I can tell you that the fans who are taking advantage of it week over week are likely hoping we don't really expand it very much, because they very much feel like the insiders, the early adopters who are gaining, time back in their day at the game because they are not waiting.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Andrew, anything to add to what Wayne and Chris have said about this?
Yeah, so I kind of look at it as a consumer. So how would the consumer use the technology, or how would they move towards adoption more fully? And when you think about trends that maybe were happening pre-COVID, things like food halls was a big one, right? So there was this move towards consolidating lots of options physically in space down to a centralized location. And mobile really allows the teams and the vendors to become almost a virtual food hall, right? So you give a lot of different options available in one centralized location. And so that's really a benefit, and how consumers are kind of moving towards adoption, because they can buy many types of items just within a central location. And so it helps, if I want pizza and you want sushi, we can have that transaction in the same space. So it's almost a virtual version of the food hall. And that's why I think we're starting to see a lot of consumer adoption and movement towards that. And then the other thing is, this idea of in-seat vending is, it's almost old school. It's the way, it had been done maybe 50 years ago in a bigger way. And in many ways, spot on. And Appetize, that was sort of their core beginning as a company. And it's something that this virtual or this mobile usage is allowing us to get back to that type of commerce. And in some cases, it's adding almost a full dollar to a per cap in some of the buildings that we're seeing. So I think that's another proof point there.
Yeah,
interesting. Andrew, I want to hit on that a little bit more. 50 years ago, tell me what you're actually thinking about there and how it's similar to what we're doing now. Is it that someone would come and actually take your order right there in the row, and then they'd come and deliver it to you? Is that what you're kind of?
Yeah, when you look at how, let's say baseball, for example, there was a lot of in-seat vending. There was a lot of commerce that was happening out in the stands. And in many cases, these types of technologies are allowing, clients and vendors to actually go back to, that type of model potentially. So, we obviously have to do it in a safe way. We have to do it in the right way to make sure that we're PCI compliant and some of those types of things. But in many cases, it's allowing a newer version of this type of commerce without cash to actually happen in a stand. And so there was this challenge because of COVID. Cash wasn't going to be accepted any longer. How do we do this? And in many cases, this type of technology is helping us, go down that road again.
Yeah, interesting. And Wayne, you mentioned the QR codes, right? Scanning the QR code on the back of a chair. QR codes have been around for a while. I know we used them to a certain degree when we were even doing events back in 2018, 2019, and you had a badge to go to the event, and someone could scan the badge and they'd get your contact info automatically from scanning the QR code. But now we see them everywhere, right? Restaurants don't even have physical menus. They expect that everyone comes in with the mobile device. Wayne, I'm curious to hear kind of whether one, you thought this would get adopted this quickly, and two, what are your expectations for 2022 and beyond when it comes to QR codes?
I'm giggling a little because, I remember going back to, selling, as a matter of fact, I think like MetLife Stadium and some other stadiums around that time. And there was always a requirement of supporting QR codes in the technology. Mm-hmm. However, the use case wasn't there. There was always this thought of like, we need QR code support, and there's a lot you can pack into a QR code. But when it came to point of sale, it was like, what do we really need it for? What are we going to use it for? And lo and behold, COVID fixed that. So now in a QR code, there's a lot of creative ways in which you can use it. The best part about it is it's lightweight, it's easy to design, easy to deploy, and also easy to tear down or move if for whatever reason, something didn't work as designed, versus constructing a stand, putting in physical point of sale, putting in physical kiosks with all that investment that comes along with it. A QR code is literally just a label that you can put on a tabletop menu. If it works, great, add some more. If not, move it to another area. Maybe the concept isn't right for QR code if it's a very complicated order process. As an example, for like a coffee stand versus a sandwich stand. So the point being is that QR codes have really found their way into this space now because of the general market and everything that you've seen in restaurants and bars and everywhere else. Now fans are kind of used to it and expecting it in some ways, but for the operator, it gives them the ability to flex, to move things around on the fly if necessary. And it has, again, low cost and a low effort to really deploy and make it successful.
Mm. And obviously, if you are using a QR code and you're expecting fans to use a QR code, they have to have some way of getting that code into whatever device they have, right? So they have to have the device, they have to have a connection to Wi-Fi or 5G or whatever it might be. And I want to transition to a question about connectivity and maybe ask this of Chris. Did you in 2019 kind of have one level of connectivity expectations for the venue, and then now that expectation is significantly more, or is it in line still with the expectations that you needed? How much additional demand are you seeing on the network as a result of everyone kind of using their phones to interact? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Listen, I think, Dan, the way I would answer it is connectivity has always been extremely important in our venue at MetLife Stadium, and we have done our best to stay ahead of the needs of the fans coming into the building. So, I liken it to we're constantly boring the tunnel. The tunnel is always under construction, getting wider and wider, right, for a greater pipeline and greater bandwidth. That said, a lot of that is future proofing because we're not sure, where are we going to be in 2 or 3 years? So we continue to up the ante, as it were. I'm glad we did. We've been fully mobile on our tickets for quite some time, so our fans were used to that. Now, the Jets app is their nerve center on game day. We're pushing out more exclusive content if you're in venue. Some of that is some of that content's very, very video rich, right? Taking up a lot of bandwidth. So we've always had the mindset to stay ahead of that. As it relates to commerce, we've had instances where suddenly we decide we want to move something outside of the fence line. And now we're in the parking lot and making sure we can get Wi-Fi out there. So we've grown accustomed to being very nimble and being able to get connectivity anywhere on site that we need to or want to transact.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I want to talk a little bit about the premium guest experience and what you're seeing, Chris, from their perspective. Are those folks, suite holders, VIPs, whatever it might be, are they as amenable to a QR code that they scan and then they can go pick up the food? Has this kind of technology revolution that we've seen for the most part, for most fans that are entering the venue now, has it translated yet to the premium experience? And do you expect it to?
So certainly I expect it to very, very rapidly. In many ways, it has already. Their tickets are mobile. So they're scanning their tickets. That's their form of entry into the building. And then in terms of their commerce experience, that has been a little more of a premium, curated, sort of concierge level experience. But it is something that we're looking to migrate over to a more mobile experience. And I think in part, the premium guest tends to like that concierge level experience. Yeah. So as long as we can maintain that service level and then possibly increase the efficiency via mobile, via QR codes, and have their experience actually improve, then I think we quickly pivot into that direction. But things like we're test piloting mobile ordering for retail in suites. With in-suite delivery. So that's an area where, we're exploring that. And as that relates to other aspects of the experience, talking about ultimately presenting someone with a bill and that paper receipt has a QR code on it. I scan the QR code and I can pay directly on my phone. That's something Wayne, Andrew, and I have discussed at length that we're looking to incorporate as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. There's often, I liken it to a push and a pull between new technologies and also that concierge in-person experience that some people expect, right? They want to have a person that they can talk to and say hello to or complain to, right? Maybe a question for Wayne and Andrew first, but we talked about on other panels today already, but there have been some labor concerns, not being able to even get labor if you want it. How do you guys discuss that when you approach customers, whether it's Chris or otherwise? And how do you make sure that you're sensitive to that topic while at the same time showing the value that you can provide, that you can provide from a tech perspective?
I think back to just to wrap the suites topic up, it goes, I guess, all the way back to the first question we had and talking about providing options. So I think you're always going to have to provide that traditional white glove treatment that suite attendees expect, but adding additional options for those one-off orders from a QR code, I am seeing more and more venues head in that direction, or use it for non-sports events. Like as an example, a concert event, you might be more open to using QR codes, but for a Jets or a Giants game, kind of stick to the traditional way of online ordering and in-suite ordering through a guest or an attendant. When we talk about labor savings, the labor shortage right now is real. So if you think about transitioning some of your cashiers to being ambassadors and showing people how to use their phone or how to use a self-service device like a kiosk, you're kind of moving the labor from one location to another, but you are limiting the amount, or at least downsizing the amount of labor you may need. I mean, I've read stories about for a college football game, 400 employees not showing up, on game day, and that's pretty impactful. So I think, again, adopting more and more mobile QR code ordering, self-service, will somewhat reduce the amount of labor that's necessary. Second, going from cash to cashless, as you can imagine, MetLife Stadium has over 1,200 point of sale devices. So back in the day, that cash room had a line out the door that you wouldn't see shutting down until 2, 3 in the morning, because the amount of cash that had to be collected, counted, and reconciled. So you're automatically seeing labor savings just in going from cash to cashless, and then introducing more and more mobile, reducing your footprint of point of sale, which will then, reduce the amount of cashiers needed. So I think naturally, kind of adopting to these mobile solutions and self-service, you're going to address that labor shortage.
Interesting. Well, let's talk revenue. It's a good transition from cash to revenue. But Chris, no need to go into extreme detail, but if you can give us some idea of how much touchless point of service and other technology may have helped to multiply revenue from your perspective, I think that'd be really interesting. And then Andrew, Wayne, any other stories you have from the marketplace, let's hear them.
Sure. So what I would say is, we have a finite number of hours to interact with our guests in the most authentic way possible, right? And that's game day. So the average NFL football game is approximately 3 hours. The gates open 2 hours prior. We have 10 home games a year. That's 50 hours. That is not a lot of time to transact and interact with our guests. So given that time frame, that 5 hours per event day, we, short of changing the architecture of the building, short of going from 1,200 POS up to 2,000 POS, right? And there are challenges in doing an expansion like that. How do we make the operation more efficient? And any efficiencies we can squeeze out of the operation translate into increased transactions. And if we can then generate efficiencies in the transaction that cause our customers to actually transact more, right? That's a win. That's how we're able to grow the revenue pie. So things like mobile ordering, making it, first of all, go to cash free. That frictionless type of experience has been certainly a win from a revenue perspective. People spend more on credit cards. We all, realize that's a fact. Then when you look at mobile ordering, when you look at grab and go, those two new ways to transact at MetLife Stadium, they've increased our efficiency and they've increased our throughput. So then, by virtue of that, they're pulling along and increasing revenue on the whole. And that also relieves some of the challenges at the more conventional belly up retail. So the early adopters win because they're gaining efficiency in their experience, whether it's mobile or grab and go. And the ones who haven't yet adopted, they're actually winning because their experience, we're helping the throughput at their experience as well. So now, if that is a pain-free experience for them, perhaps they'll come back now because it was pretty smooth. Now I'll transact another time in addition. So it is really the rising tide that lifts all ships.
Well said. Thank you, Chris. Wayne, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we're paying attention to closely is the overall speed of service at each transaction, right? So how do we, to Chris's point, you can change to go 100% cashless or change a stand to more of a marketplace and see some increases in check average and those kinds of things. But the other way that we can do that is if we can just speed people through the line more quickly in each individual transaction, get, let's say another transaction per stand per hour, right? That's another way to do it. And so we're paying attention closely to whether it's a few seconds or, how do we overall get, that individual transaction down to be almost instantaneous. That's one. And then the other thing that's going to do too is add in aggregate. We talked a little bit about labor. Tipping is another, component that we're seeing as we move to more and more cashless types of transactions. allowing fans to tip has seen an increase in the benefit to the employees. And that is an aggregate benefit to the overall business because, they're happier, they're more, that helps overall guest experience with happier employees, which then again, to Chris's point, adds to the overall benefit to the building from a check average and from fan satisfaction and those kinds of things. So it really is all interconnected. And if we can do all of those things well and efficiently, we should be able to see, a much larger increase in the per caps in these buildings.
Thank you, Andrew. Wayne, anything to add?
The last thing I would add is that, there's always been a focus on data and data collection. And, sometimes I think people forget, like if you're moving from cashless or moving from cash to cashless, you're automatically fixing one of the biggest challenges in trying to evaluate your fan spend. There's always been that challenge of looking at a data set, and when it's 50% cash, it makes it very difficult to really understand what your fans are purchasing, where they're purchasing it, when they're purchasing it, and why they're purchasing it. So that's kind of a byproduct that I like to always highlight is when you're moving into a cashless environment, you are now going to have a means to collect that data and have a more complete sample or data set, I should say. So you're not lacking any of the cash transactions. So some people kind of overlook that fact, but it's pretty important these days.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's absolutely true.
No doubt. Well said. All right, guys, I've got one more question, but I want to remind the audience that all three of my panelists will do their best to make their way to the speed networking directly after this. So if you've got questions or you want to network with them, jump into the speed networking and you may be paired with one of our folks up here. Make sure you take advantage of that. So my last question is this, and actually I think I'm going to change it up a little bit. I want this to kind of be like a speed round, and you guys can give me an explanation if you want to your answer or you don't have to. But thinking about all the things we talked about, all the guest experience technologies and innovations that we've hit on so far, what will be in your mind the most important one next year and the year after that? And it could be the same one that's the most important right now that we hit on, but I want you guys to give me one if you could. And Chris, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I would say it would be transacting, especially in the food and beverage world. Walk in, grab items off the shelf, walk out. I don't need to interact with any POS, any person, and it is the fastest possible transaction. It can take as long as I want or as short as I want, and you're essentially giving the consumer all of this choice.
Yep. And back to what Chris mentioned earlier, we use that term frictionless. That's the perfect way to sum it up. Allow a fan to come in, browse, buy, and move to the next stand or get back to their seat, never missing a second of action if they can. And by having options available to them so they can pick and choose what they're most comfortable with. Now what's going to happen moving into next year is making it more efficient, making it even faster, more intuitive, automated, autonomous checkout, for example. You're starting to see that really make its way into this market. So that's where I see things moving, just to kind of highlight what Chris said, the frictionless experience for the fan.
Well said. Andrew, the last word is yours.
Okay, thanks. I going back to what Wayne just said about data, I think that idea of customer lifetime value is huge. And I think the learnings that we're getting out of what's happening now and the data collection component is going to make us better marketers. And we're going to be able to better meet fans' needs where they are and help us program better, put the right technology in the right place at the right price, and serve the needs of fans in a much bigger way. And I think we're going to see a revolution in that over the next 2 to 3 years.
Andrew, Chris, Wayne, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it and we appreciate it. A virtual round of applause to you and everyone out there in the audience. Don't go away. We've got more in store. Have a great day, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.